the two of them. Todd Williams and his family are going to speak first for the first 30 minutes. You can, we'll save questions for the end of his talk. And I guess, Todd, did you, I guess, close off their videos, let us know. That may or may not be necessary, but I will turn it over to Todd and his family, and he will present about Adventures with Kids.
Hey, Todd, just before you start, folks, I'd like you all to please mute your microphone. You can do that on the lower left corner of your Zoom screen. It just keeps down the noise so that we can also hear the speaker much better. And then you can turn it on when it's time for questions after Todd speaks, and Todd and family speaks. Thanks.
All right. My name is Wyatt.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Todd, as you know.
I'm Tara. I'm Oliver. And we have Benjamin back here.
Let's see. Are you sharing screen, Dave?
No, we have to share our screen.
You can share your screen now.
Okay.
And there we go.
Okay. Can everybody see our slides?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a little different than it was the other night. Okay. So we're here to tell you about one of our numerous adventures that we've had over the years as a family. We've got a little more adventures, but tonight we're going to tell you about a trip from 2 years ago, pre-COVID, in April of 2019. We traveled the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal on our bicycles as a 5-day through bike.
You know, just people as far as you can see, just.
So we're going to use this as an example of a real adventure that you can take with your family. Certainly, we're going to have some tips along the way, and we are excited to share some of the ways in which we are able to organize and execute a real adventure.
So some basics about the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. It is now a National Historical Park, but it was an original operating canal. Right after the Erie Canal opened up, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal opened, or construction began on it. It's 184 miles, all the way right to downtown Washington, D.C. in Georgetown. Operated for almost 100 years before the railroad took over and floods washed out much of the infrastructure. It is directly along the Potomac River, so I thought it was a much more scenic bike ride than just biking along the Erie Canal, which tends to be very flat. Because it's flowing downhill, or the river is flowing downhill, there's a number of locks, 74 locks, a lot of very long tunnel that Wyatt will tell you about. So we drove down on a Sunday to Cumberland, Maryland from Rochester. It was a pretty dreary, rainy day. Lots of railroads running along the Potomac River and there through Western Maryland going out to Chicago. I dropped the family off in Cumberland, and then I drove our car into Washington, D.C. and took the Amtrak train right back to Cumberland and was back in Cumberland in about 6 hours. 4-hour drive to DC and a 2-hour drive back, or a 2-hour train ride back to Cumberland. You can take your bikes on the train. So it is an option to do it fully self-supported, starting from DC, take the train out to Cumberland and bike back to DC. So lots of train activity, a beautiful train ride right along the Potomac River. Just as I was arriving back in Cumberland, the rain cleared out, a beautiful rainbow. And so it looked like it was going to be a good 5-day biking trip back to DC.
I was nervous at the beginning.
So it's definitely sorry,
Yeah, so we have these Todd and Tara tips around preparing for trips that we're going to share with you, and we'll have tips along the way. So one of the biggest tips is to be familiar with the activity before you introduce kids to it. Make sure you know how to canoe or ski or bike, obviously, before you introduce an extra level of complexity with kids. One of the big things, especially when you have kids that are older, is to really get consensus that we are all excited and invested into this trip. Have a plan A, B, and C. One of the things that Todd is really good about is researching ahead of time. So research your routes, read guidebooks, talk to people, get as much information as you can, and that is going to really help you. And then watch the weather.
So one of the features of our trip was, although we called it a wilderness trip in our title, we did not bring a tent with us. We slept in a different type of lodging every night. So in Cumberland, we stayed in a nice regular old Fairfield Inn with a beautiful breakfast and packed up our stuff. And this was not a style of trip that we had done before. This was our first trip as a family where we left the car behind and did something using an alternative mode of transportation. So here we go on Monday morning. Our goal was to go 55 miles or 50 to 55 miles to Hancock. The first section of the C&O is pretty rural, not very few towns along the way. And so we didn't really know what to expect here. But we have, as you can see, we've got our 4 bicycles. Tara is pulling Benjamin in his car seat and the other gear that we would need for that day, like a change of clothes or raincoats, lunch for the day, those kinds of things. In my trailer, I'm pulling everything else. We've got our clothes for 5 days, blankets and repair gear for the bikes, that kind of stuff. So, Tara's around 50, 60 pounds maybe, and I'm in the 60 to 80 pounds of gear that we're towing along with us. Basically every mile along the C&O Canal, there's a trail marker, so that's really nice. It can be rejuvenating to say, wow, I biked a mile. So here's although it's 184.5 miles, we either missed 184 or it wasn't there. So 1.5 miles down, 183 to go, yes. Beautiful trail around Cumberland. That's a relatively well-used section. So we got the first aqueduct, you've got railroad bridges going over you. Nice gravel trail. Although we did not use them, about every 7 miles, there are hiker-biker campsites that the National Park Service maintains. There's a water pump that has been tested for potability. There's a picnic table, there's a fire pit, and a porta potty at every campsite. So, so definitely a doable trip as a bike packing trip. I was going to talk. Oliver, you going to say about something about this? It had rained all day the day before, as we said, so lots of mud puddles. The further you got away from Cumberland, the less used the trail was, and the muddier it was, more potholed it was. So we were, I wouldn't say surprised by that, but it definitely slowed us down. Still with smiles on our faces.
It was a lot harder than the Erie Canal, which we had practiced on. So we were, there was a lot more mud and potholes, etc.
So we stopped for lunch after, 3 hours of biking. Sun had started to come out. It was very, very windy this day, as it often is after a cold front and the high pressure is building in, bringing that sunshine with it. But thankfully, Benjamin is a very happy baby with some avocado, goldfish crackers, yogurt for lunch that day, I think we had. Just enjoying our time together as a family.
So one of the things, obviously, that everyone needs to keep moving on the trail is water and food. And the way that we approach it is that everyone has their own water bottle. Kids tend to forget to drink, and so it is especially important to remind them to drink, especially in the winter. We find that good food leads to high morale. So make sure that you are feeding your kids what they like to eat. We let the kids usually go and pick some food or candy that they want to bring with them, and they carry that with them. What's your favorite?
Candy.
Okay. Oranges are really a nice healthy treat as well, and they travel well. Biggest tip is if you have a kid that's cranky, whiny, or slow, they're probably hungry. So make sure to feed and water them.
The water levels were high, and as you can see, it was muddy, as we've told you already. Keep clicking down the mileages on this first day. Happy kids.
Still muddy.
Oh yeah, right. Okay. So around about lunchtime, we came to the realization or made the decision to shift our plans. We were not going to make it to Hancock on the first day. We had done some research, calling some other hotels. This was very early in the season for the C&O Canal tourist trade. So one hotel was closed for renovations. It wouldn't open for another 3 weeks. There was another lodge that had relatively poor hygiene reviews that I had called, and he had called me back the night before and left a message, but I hadn't talked to him. But we connected with this gentleman, Dan, who I had read about before, and I think I had texted with him, and he was booked the first night, the Monday night that we were going to be headed through. But sort of out of the blue, sort of Providence, he took the initiative. This is what I remember. He took the initiative and texted me to let me know that the group that had booked him for Monday night because of the rain had postponed their journey by 1 day, and he now had openings at his home. So we texted a few times throughout the day and eventually committed to staying with him in Paw Paw, West Virginia. Dan is an amazing character. He really just opens his entire house. It's a tiny 1,000 square foot ranch house with 2 bedrooms. We filled an entire bedroom. These 2 other gentlemen filled the other bedroom, and Dan slept in his lazy boy recliner with his dog Moxie, and served us this amazing breakfast the next morning with eggs and toast and Canadian bacon. Read us some quotes from Abraham Lincoln and Einstein to motivate us for the day, and sent us off on our way. So I'm endlessly thankful for Dan and the hospitality that he showed. A great place to stay in Paw Paw, West Virginia. Oliver has a comment about Paw Paw, I think.
Oh, yeah. They had a great 20-piece chicken nugget at the gas station.
It was the only restaurant open.
Yes.
Again, it was early in the season. So there are Paw Paw's about 2,000 people, maybe a little less than that, but restaurants were not really open for the tourist trade yet this year.
So this is the Papa Tunnel. We did that in the morning of the next day. It's 3,118 feet long. It took 14 years to build, and it goes straight through a mountain, and it avoids 6 miles of curvy horseshoe-shaped rivers.
There is Oliver going through the tunnel.
It was fun. We had a good time echoing through the tunnel and enjoying that 3/4 of a mile or 2/3 of a mile through the darkness.
And it was pretty cool. It was a little bit light because the light bounced off the water in the tunnel. There's the other side of the tunnel. You can see all the way through the tunnel, and there's some waterfalls at the other side. There's also a boardwalk because there was steep cliffs there.
That section of the trail is often closed by rock slides in the springtime.
Some pretty flowers.
But with the sunshine and the trail drying out, we were really cruising this day. Because we hadn't made our destination the first day, our goal was to get back onto track, and so that meant 55 miles on this second day to get to Williamsport, Maryland. And with the sunshine and it was 70 to 80 degrees every day. It was a great temperature for biking. Hold on there. Great temperature for biking. And so we were cruising along, making great time. And then we had read about this, and this really saved our butts on that day. The Western Maryland Rail Trail, I think it's a state park. It directly parallels the C&O Canal, and it's a paved bike path for more than 20 miles. So we took advantage of that bike path, the paved bike path. We had averaged between 6 and 7 miles an hour on the first day, and 10 to 11 or so was our goal. And we averaged 15 miles an hour on this 20-mile section of the Western Maryland Rail Trail. So made up some good time there. So just some nice pictures along the way. You're gonna say something about this one? The old bridges.
I don't remember.
So there are some parts of the Potomac. In that previous picture, you saw a low dam. Some parts of the Potomac were dammed to flatten out the water, create slack water areas so that the barges traveling the canal could go right up the river. And this is one of the areas where it's essentially a tidal lock where the boats are coming back into a canal. So you've got a lock keeper's house on the left there with the white building with the green shutters. And the structure there is actually a bridge for the mules to cross over the canal and get back on the correct side of the towpath after the boats re-enter the canal from being out on the river. So lots of examples. Although the C&O Canal was derelict for about 40 years, the brick structures and the stone structures were in great shape. Lots of examples and lots of wayside signs explaining what was going on. So this was a little bit after sunset on that day. We reached mile 100, which means that we had gone 85 miles. We still had 100 miles to go to DC, but definitely a big moment for us just before we reached Williamsport, Maryland.
So when you go out with kids, and especially when you're on a through journey, you have to use your resources. So take friends if you can to help carry gear. We've found that to be very helpful, especially if diapers are involved. Ask people for help. So Dan, that we stayed with on night number 1, was super helpful. Look for your resources. And live the trip in your mind before you take it, so you can sort of plan out your day and anticipate what moods might be. Write down an itinerary, but be flexible enough to deviate from it and plan what you're going to eat along the way.
So here we stayed in another B&B, and the Netflix and the shoe dryer really brought us through the night.
Oliver liked to have dry shoes in the morning, and we also had really yummy pizza.
Okay. So yeah, our third lodging type there, stayed in a pretty swanky bed and breakfast, a big old brownstone 3-story building right next to the town hall in Williamsport. The next day we had wanted to take a detour to Antietam, so we decided just to bike the roads. And we could have biked along the canal further and then detoured up the roads, but it looked like a better route for our family to stay on the roads for the morning and get to Antietam. So as some of you might know, Antietam or Sharpsburg was the bloodiest day in American history. 22,000 Americans on the north and the south sides combined died in a single day. So pretty sad day for American history to be fighting against each other. But now it's mostly a set of fields with some stone walls and a few monuments. I was a little surprised it wasn't as built up as Gettysburg, the other very famous Civil War battlefield, but definitely a place worth visiting for the American history aspect of that. So back on the C&O Canal.
Look at my guy
Yeah, he's jumping
in a cave.
in the cave, yeah.
That's the one.
Oh, this is where on our bike computers that we had on our bikes. This is where we hit 900
Or 99.
99.999 miles.
Woohoo! So good so far. Yeah, so we reached Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, or technically just across the river from Harper's Ferry in, forget the name of the town now, in Maryland. There's not much there. But we stayed in the youth hostel, or just hostel, because the Appalachian Trail, Reinhardt, you might know, the Appalachian Trail goes through Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, crosses the Potomac River there. So beautiful youth hostel with bunk rooms for about 60 people. And we had to bike up the steep hill to get to the bluff that this youth hostel was up on. So we got to play some games, some Connect Four and chess. Nice dinner out. So our fourth different type of lodging after a routine hotel, Dan's house, swanky bed and breakfast. Now we're in a youth hostel.
Choo-choo.
That's right. And ice cream.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No one's there.
Yeah. So morale is a big it's going to sort of make or break if you have a positive experience. So try to keep it positive, even if you're having a rough day, and be a good cheerleader for your kids. Be real about the situation that you're in. Stop for snacks. We find that singing songs along the way, even, now with the kids at 13 and 15 will keep them going. We can play the game of I Spy, or Granddad Les introduced us to Hinky Pinky, and we can explain those rules if you want later.
I'm blushing.
Oh, yes. The little Monocacy River. As you can see on the right, the far right, you can see the gravel for the train tracks that we were very near at this point in the trail. Then a little further in from the right-hand side, you can see the washed out bluff. That is the Canal towpath right there with a fence over it. We did know entering this trip that the towpath had been washed out by rains just a few weeks before this, but there was very little information about how a biker would handle it. The National Park Service's official stance was that they published a bypass route on roads that went up at least one really big hill. It was something like 800 vertical feet to go over the road route. We decided that wasn't a good choice. The train tracks were definitely busy. That was not a good choice. There was a family that was just day biking that came up behind us at about this time, and they did start to try and use the railroad tracks to bypass this washout, because the railroad tracks had not washed out. Or no, actually the railroad tracks had washed out, but they had fixed them within a few days, because it is the main line going out to Chicago, Mr. Benjamin. But we were told that the water was shallow enough and warm enough to be able to ferry our goods across the stream. And when we got there, it looked like that was the best choice. So that's what we did. A couple trips back and forth across the little Monocacy River, and we were dry and got a little swim. It was 80 degrees. The water temperature was maybe 70. I don't remember it being cold at all. So that is C&O right there. Definitely one of the major memories of our trip, to make it across that river crossing and get our gear and keep our gear dry. Benjamin enjoyed it too. So as you start getting closer to DC and the trail becomes more well-traveled, the aqueducts and bridges are more well taken care of. 50 miles to go, 130 done. Getting closer. Benjamin's happy. Oh, this is a great video.
So we didn't know what would happen, and we wanted to make sure that we had the car seat with us. So we kind of configured the bike trailer to also have the bike seat, or excuse me, have the car seat in it in the case that we did need to get rescued. So that was sort of a comfort level for Benjamin to be in his car seat, but also it was a sort of a fail-safe for us.
And we're also a little concerned about him, the shaking that would go on. He was 11 months old, just short of a year at this point. So a little concerned about shaking and his muscles being able to handle it. He did it spectacular. As you can see in these two pictures, he did not just lie in his car seat the whole time. There were many times where he was turned around, leaning the other way, playing with toys, reaching down on the side to get something that had fallen. I think he entertained himself in his little pod.
Gear is one of the big struggles with kids or challenges. Buy the gear that you need. Cotton obviously is not what we're looking for when we're outside. I find that fleece PJs are a great base layer. They make rain gear for kids and rain suits for kids. I always will carry extra hat, mittens, boots, well, not boots, but hat, mittens, socks for kids because they just find those puddles. Snow suits if it's cold, and extra layers around feet if it is cold. I tend to carry a very large backpack when we're hiking to carry all this extra gear, and then obviously your 10 essentials, and maybe the 11th essential is toys to keep little people entertained.
And toilet paper. You can never forget the toilet paper.
Yeah.
There's some turtles on a log and eating some lunch.
We saw thousands and thousands and thousands of turtles. Where the Canal prism was flooded, every down log had turtles on it on these sunny days. It was really amazing to see that much of a single wildlife. We saw signs of beavers. We saw some other water birds. So this is the most famous of the aqueducts, the largest of the aqueducts over the, I think it's just called the Monocacy River, but it would be the greater Monocacy River if it's not just the Monocacy River. But 7 arches, beautifully restored, and when the National Park Service took over, but really quite a sight to see on a sunny day. 40 miles to go.
This is a picture of the lock keeper's house. We stayed in that for one of the nights. It has no electricity and no water, but it was definitely fun. We went down to a campsite that had a water pump, and that's how we got our water. We played checkers, and the cabin is decorated for the Civil War era. We cooked hot dogs over a campfire, and we worked on our Junior Ranger patches or pins. If you can, try and do the Junior Ranger program. It's a lot of fun, and you also learn a lot about where you're going. We slept on rope beds, so there's rope underneath the mattress.
So there are about 5 lock houses that are maintained by the Canal Trust, which is the nonprofit group that is the Friends group for the C&O Canal. So there are about 5 lock houses that you can rent out and stay in. I think this was the most rustic of them, but it fit in the right spot, leaving us 35 miles to go on our 5th day to Washington, D.C. 30 miles, 20 miles, so close.
There's some beautiful flowers starting to emerge, which was really fun to see. You know, things blooming because it was very cold at home still.
And you can see the towpath quality improves. Many, many, many more people are using the C&O Canal as we get into Bethesda and Cabin John and Northern Virginia, getting closer and closer to DC. So Wyatt was 13 years old at mile 13, and Oliver was 10 years old at mile 10. Here we are, just a few miles from the end, with the I think that's the Cabin John Parkway on the left, and the Canal Prism is still there. Woo-hoo! We made it. We made it in this little, very hard to find spot right in downtown Georgetown, behind the Thompson's Boathouse. If anybody knows where that is the Tidewater Lock, mile 0 of the C&O Canal. And we made it in the nick of time. We had 4.5 days with no rain and lots of sunshine and perfect temperatures. For the last hour of biking, I was checking the radar once in a while. And we had a classic Washington, D.C. downpour for the next 3 hours right after we took the left-hand picture. Thankfully, nobody wanted to row out of the rowing shells at Thompson, so they let us go inside and wait out the rain. And Wyatt and I eventually, I was going to bike down to the National Airport, which is where we kept our car. That was the recommended spot for long-term parking, was the Reagan National Airport economy parking. My plan was to just bike down one of the bike trails, the Mount Vernon Parkway, or Mount Vernon Bikeway. Sorry, we're having trouble with Benjamin kicking.
Benjamin trouble.
But Wyatt and I took an Uber, walked through ankle-deep water to cross the streets. It was really, really raining hard, and I'm very, very thankful that we were not biking in that. But we stayed dry most of the way, and I think all of us would say it was a vacation. It was an adventure, and we definitely smile when we think of the memories that we had on this trip.
So in general, why should you bring your kids out? You know, they're fussy. They will maybe not do exactly what you want. But here are some of the reasons why I think it's great. It makes kids be problem solvers. If they're hiking, if they're biking, every moment really they're problem solving. I think it's good to get out of your comfort zone and have some unknowns that everyone can be excited with. The natural world is so important, and if you bring them out now, they will develop a lifetime relationship with the outdoors and teach them to respect the outdoors. It's healthy. We all feel good going out into nature. It's calming, and it definitely is good for kids too. And kids will discover amazing things along the way, be it mushrooms or a heron or turtles that are doing funny things. And obviously you get, only a short amount of time while they're kids. So you're creating some very special memories that they and you will share.
So just a little shout out to the people that have helped us. Oh, we'll just move on. Okay. I thought since turning back to more locally in the Adirondack Mountain Club, we wanted to talk about some of the other things that we've done. Took us about 3 years, but last year we finished the Kids on the Trail and have patches for that. Down on the lower left, we finished the Tupper Lake Triad, which is 3 mountains, only about 8 miles total. That's a good one to do with young kids. The Saranac Lake Sixers was our first of these patches to complete. And I think the lake lasted 9, or we did that. Did we finish that this winter? I think.
Yeah.
Right? But most of recently, the Fire Tower Challenge in the upper center there. It took us about 6 years, but Memorial Day weekend, just 2 weeks ago, we finished the Fire Tower Challenge. Yeah!
Woo!
So patches are fun, but they create the checklist. They create the what's coming up next for our family of what we want to do. And so I think the Adirondack Quest, which is sponsored by our own Genesee Valley chapter, is the next patch or next checklist that we'll look at earning. But we've not really looked at starting that. We've continued with our success on the C&O Canal. We've continued some other journeys. Last summer, we did not slow down and stay in our house. We canoed 45 miles on the Northern Forest Canoe Trail and finished that in about 5 days, and then did another 15 miles or so going into the Upper Lake and doing some more camping there. So there we really did take a tent and sleeping bags because the luxury of the canoe allows you to take more gear. So we really left our car behind there. And then this winter, we did a through ski of the Jackrabbit Trail. We did stay in cabins, 2 different cabins that we stayed in. We did not camp out for that trip. We're not that crazy, folks. But a great ski. Me carrying Benjamin on my back, and Wyatt and Oliver and Tara and I skiing the 50 miles or so of the Jackrabbit Trail from Keene to Paul Smith's. Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much for listening to us. I hope you guys are inspired a little bit to go on the C&O Canal itself or organize a bike trip to go somewhere and have some more fun this summer.
Todd, Tara, Benjamin, Wyatt, and Oliver, thank you very much for sharing that trip. You guys had great tips, great pictures. I am very impressed with all of the adventures that you've managed to do with your family. I think that's really inspiring for us, even as individuals. I mean, I'd like to get out there and do some of the things you've done just with my husband. So
Go for it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're working on the Fire Tower Challenge right now.
Yep.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you all. I appreciate all of you sharing and telling us your story. So thanks for, yeah, I wish there was a way to give this big round of applause, you know, being online, but there's a shout out to you, yes. So thank you, that was really great. I love the adventure, and I hope to even do that, the C&O bike ride myself, and get my grandson who's living in Virginia to do it with me.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much. Does anybody have some questions for them? I think there are a couple of things on the chat. Let's see, Dave Rossi says to everyone, love hearing about your family. These are moving faster than I can read them. Let's see if I can go one direction or another. Lois Dannenberg says she's volunteering as a summit steward on Cascade for a couple of days in July and August. I think that was something from our earlier talk. And then Katie Kusick, the new programs director for the fall and beyond, says great presentation, thank you. Shay Hanford said thank you, Williams family, great presentation. Luke Nelson says thanks, Todd and family. David Rossi says love hearing about your family adventures, Williams family. Annie says thanks for the informative upbeat presentation. Many of the YMs are now families, so I shared it with them. So thanks, Annie, for doing that. Reinhard says excellent presentation. Thank you, Williams family. Is there anybody who has any questions for them about that? I will say, after Todd told me about this, I did look up online about this, and there is a planner that's pretty cool that can help you plan a bike trip on the C&O rail trail. I don't know if it's really called a rail trail, but the C&O.
What?
Canal.
Yeah, and it tells you where there are historic houses to stay, where there are restaurants, where there are campsites all along the way. And I thought that makes it easier for planning a trip like that. That way, did you guys use that at all or no?
Yeah.
That's from the bikewashington.org.
I can't remember who offered it, but this was very organized. It showed all the historic houses that you could stay in and how far apart they were, and it laid it all out.
Yeah, definitely used that resource. We were very early in the season, so for us, a lot of the facilities weren't open yet, but we worked around it and, you know, pieced it together.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And Oliver and Wyatt, did you guys like this trip?
Oh yeah, it was
Yes.
amazing.
It was worth doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
Highly recommended.
it was a lot of fun.
We'll do it again for anyone who wants to join us.
And, yeah, and to think that you rode 185 miles, that's pretty awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
In one trip. I'm sure you've ridden even more than that, but in one trip, that's pretty cool. Okay, well, we're gonna let you guys go and we'll move on to our second presentation.